Level 1, Thrall. The longship needs bailing and the water doesn't care that your shoulders are on fire. You work the wooden bucket in a rhythm that stopped feeling voluntary 3 hours ago. Around you, free men sleep, eat, argue. You do none of these things on your own terms. The hold smells of bilge, water, and salted fish, and the particular sourness of men who haven't washed in weeks. You've stopped noticing your own smell. That was the first thing to go. You were taken from a village whose name you still say quietly to yourself each night, like a prayer to a god who clearly isn't listening. A raid, a bad season, a debt your father couldn't pay. It doesn't matter now. What matters is that the bucket is never empty, and the man above deck will notice if you slow down. His name is Bjorn. You know this because you've heard others say it, never because he's introduced himself. When the ship makes land, you carry cargo. Barrels of mead, furs, iron ingots, your back decides nothing, your feet go where the cargo needs to go. At the settlement, you sleep near the animals because the warmth is practical, not because anyone is being cruel, which is somehow worse. Cruelty would at least be personal. There is a boy here, another thrall, maybe 12 years old. He hands you a piece of bread once without saying anything. You eat it in 4 bites and feel something you can't name, gratitude, maybe, or grief for a world where bread requires gratitude. You watch the free men that evening, sitting around fire, laughing at something. Their laughter travels a distance to reach you that has nothing to do with how far away they're sitting. You think about running. You think about it the way a man thinks about breathing underwater theoretically, quietly, with the full knowledge of what it costs. The bucket still needs bailing. Level 2, Karle the freedman. Someone has handed you a coin. You turn it over in your palm like it's a living thing that might decide to leave. The Jarl who freed you said something about good service and the gods witnessing. You heard the words, but they slid off you the way water slides off cold iron. What you felt, standing there, was not joy. It was the vertiginous terror of a man who no longer knows what his hands are supposed to do next. You work the farm of a Bondi, a landholder outside the settlement's eastern edge. The work is brutal and familiar. You split wood, mend fences, plant barley in rows that the soil accepts indifferently. The difference is that now, at the end of the week, there is something owed to you. Not much. Enough to know the difference. You eat at the low end of the table instead of outside it. And the first time you sat down at that bench, you couldn't finish your food because your hands were shaking. The Bondi's wife watches you sometimes. Not with hostility, exactly. With the careful attention of a woman assessing something she doesn't entirely trust. You understand this. You don't entirely trust yourself either. There's a thrall here who bails water from the drainage ditches. Young, blank-eyed in the way you recognize from the inside. You consider saying something to him, some word that might land like the piece of bread that boy handed you once on the ship. You say nothing. You don't know why. Maybe because the distance you crossed to get here felt so immense that you can't yet afford to look backward across it. A free man insults you at the market, something small, something about the way you walk, the way you hold your money. You stand very still and let it pass. Freedom, you are learning, is not protection. It is simply a different kind of exposure. The chain is gone, but the shape it left behind takes considerably longer to disappear. At night, you count the coin again. It's still there. Level 3, Bondi, the freeborn farmer and landowner. The harvest is 3 weeks late and you can feel it in the way your wife doesn't mention it. That silence has its own weight. You walk the barley rows in the gray morning while the dew is still on everything, pressing the stalks between your fingers, reading them the way your father taught you, the way his father taught him. The reading says, not yet. The reading says, maybe. The reading says, nothing you want to hear. You own this land, 30 acres of it, a longhouse, 2 goats, 5 cattle, and the tools to work all of it. You are not a wealthy man, but you are a man of standing. At the thing, the assembly where free men speak and laws are decided, your voice counts. You have voted on disputes. You have stood and named your position and had other men nod. This is not nothing, but the harvest. But the tithe to the Jarl whose protection you technically live under. But the 2 farmhands you owe wages to, and the Karle who sleeps in the outbuilding and whom you cannot afford to let go or to properly keep, the arithmetic of a small life is relentless. A raiding party forms in the settlement. Young men, some you recognize, sharpening swords with a cheerful violence that tells you they have not yet lost enough to be afraid of losing. They ask if you'll join. The share of plunder could save the season, more than save it. You think about your wife's silence. You think about your children, 3 of them, the youngest still at the breast. You think about who tends the cattle if you sail and don't come back. You tell them no. They receive this without contempt, which is almost harder. One of them, Ragnar's son, claps your shoulder and says something about next season. You watch them walk away toward the harbor with something you won't let yourself call envy. The barley comes in 2 weeks later. Enough. Just enough. You stand in the field at dusk when the last of it is bundled, and the relief is so complete it feels almost like grief, and you don't examine that too closely. Level 4, Huscarl, the household warrior. You are standing in your Jarl's hall with blood drying on your forearm and nobody is talking about it. The raid on the coastal village went the way raids go: fast, loud, then suddenly very quiet. You did what you were trained to do. Your body knew the sequence before your mind caught up. Shield, angle, strike, move. The man across from you had been trying to protect something. A doorway, maybe? A room behind a doorway? You didn't look too long at his face. Now you're in the hall. Mead is being poured. Someone is already making the raid into a story, shaving the chaos into something with shape and glory. You drink and let the story happen without you. The firelight makes everything amber and soft, and you are aware that the softness is a lie the light tells, not the truth the day held. Your arm smells of iron. You've washed, but not enough. You chose this life, which separates you from the thrall and the farmer. You swore an oath to your Jarl with full knowledge of what oaths cost. He feeds you, arms you, houses you in his hall, and in return you are the instrument of his will. This is the arrangement, and you believe in it on most days. Today is not most days. His daughter brings you bread. She is maybe 15, serious-faced, and she hands it to you like she knows you need it, without wanting to say so. You thank her. She nods and leaves. For a moment, the hall is just a hall, warm, smoky, full of men who are tired in the same way you are. Your Jarl calls you over later, looks at your arm, asks if you're fit, you say yes. He nods in the way men nod when they're already thinking about the next thing. You were the instrument of his will today, and tomorrow you'll be the instrument of his will again. This is what you chose. On most days, you believe it. Tonight, you fall asleep in the hall, with your sword arm tucked against your body like something that needs protecting. Level 5, Skald the poet and keeper of memory. The Jarl wants a verse about the raid before the mead is finished, which means you have approximately the length of a man's patience to turn violence into music. You stand. The hall quiets. This is the one power you hold that a sword cannot duplicate. No one silences a sword. Everyone quiets for a Skald because everyone wants to be remembered correctly, and only you control that. You speak the verse. You have composed it in the last 20 minutes while appearing to simply drink. The words land well. You can tell by the way certain men sit differently in their chairs, taller, more settled into themselves when their names are mentioned. The Jarl's face opens slightly. He nods at you the way a man nods at a well-functioning tool, and you accept this because it's what the role asks. What the hall doesn't know is that you remember everything, not just what you choose to put in verses, everything. You saw Leif's hands shaking before the raid, which you left out. You saw the Jarl hesitate at the village gate for a half-second before the order, which you will never speak aloud. Memory is a kind of power, but it's also a kind of prison. You carry these men's true selves alongside their performed ones, and the weight is not always comfortable. You have traveled to 3 Jarl's halls. You have outlasted 2 of them. You have spoken the death verse for men who were alive when you met them, and men who were cruel to you, and men who were kind, and the verses for each were shaped by what those men needed to leave behind, not necessarily what they were. This is the craft. This is also the compromise at the center of the craft. A young warrior asks you later, privately, half drunk, if you'll remember him. You look at him. He's maybe 20, with a jaw like carved wood and eyes that haven't yet learned to hide things. You tell him that every man who does something worth remembering gets remembered. He hears this as a yes, you let him. Level 6, Gothi the priest and keeper of rites. The animal is already dead. You stand over it in the gray cold of the morning and read the blood the way your teacher's teacher taught, back through a lineage of reading that predates the settlement by longer than anyone living can count. What you see is ambiguous. What you will report to the Jarl is not. This is the gap at the center of your authority, and you have lived inside it long enough to stop flinching. The gods speak in patterns and silences, in the behavior of birds and the way blood pools on stone. They do not speak in sentences. They have never spoken in sentences. What you do, what every Gothi does, is translate a language that has no words into words that men in halls can use to make decisions. The translation is always partly invention. You have made peace with this because the alternative is silence, and silence in your role is interpreted as failure or worse, as divine disfavor directed at the community. So you speak. You read what you can and fill the rest with what your knowledge tells you is most probably true, and you hold the whole construction together with the confidence that the role requires. You sacrificed here last season too. That sacrifice preceded a good harvest. Causation is a story men tell. You were the one who told it. There is a man in the settlement Orm, a Bondi, stubborn, land dispute carrying Orm who doesn't believe you, not in any dramatic way. He simply watches you with a flatness behind his eyes that says he sees the gap. You have done nothing to Orm. You do not need to. Men who say the emperor has no clothes need an audience, and Orm has cultivated none. Still, you notice when he's in the crowd. You notice the way one honest skeptic in a room changes the air, slightly, the way a draft changes a fire. After the rite, a woman approaches. Her son is ill. She wants to know what the gods say. You look at her face, the specific desperation of a mother, which is its own kind of sacred, and you tell her what she needs to do. Some of it is herbal knowledge that will genuinely help. Some of it is ritual that may help through the mysterious channel of belief itself. None of it is a lie you made up for personal gain. All of it is more certain in your mouth than it is in your heart. She thanks you with the kind of gratitude that lands like a stone. Level 7, Lendmann the Regional Lord. 3 Jarls answer to you, and one of them is smiling right now in a way that requires interpretation. His name is Sigurd. He is feasting you in his hall, which is smaller than yours but warmer somehow. And the warmth might be genuine, or it might be the specific hospitality of a man who wants something. You have been reading this kind of warmth for 20 years. You are still not always right. The longship taxes came in short this season. Not so short that you can call it defiance. Sigurd would say it was the storms, the poor catch, the late ice, and all of these things are true enough to be unprovable as excuses. You accepted the short payment because the alternative is escalation, and escalation between Lendmann and Jarl is a fire that does not stay in one house. But you noted it. You note everything. The weight of everything you note is something you feel most clearly at 3 in the morning in your own hall when the fire is low. Your eldest son rode to battle last season under Sigurd's banner, your arrangement, a gesture of alliance and trust. He came back. Not all of them did, and you watched your son come back through the gate with a particular expression that a father who has also been to battle recognizes. The look of someone who has revised their understanding of what the world is made of. You said nothing to him about it. You knew he needed the silence more than the words. At dinner, Sigurd proposes a trade negotiation access to the Eastern River route in exchange for reduced tithes for 2 seasons. The proposal is reasonable. The proposal is also a test of how much you need the revenue versus how much you need him afraid of you. You eat for a moment, considering the Skald at the far end of the hall is watching you, which means this moment will be remembered however you play it. You tell Sigurd you'll consider his proposal and give your answer before the next full moon. He smiles again. You smile back. Neither smile means anything except this conversation is still happening. You leave 3 days later with the proposal unresolved and 2 new informants among Sigurd's household staff. This is what management looks like from the inside. Level 8, Jarl the Chieftain. The man kneeling before you has done something that requires a decision, and the decision will be referenced for years. Everyone in this hall knows it. You know it. The man kneeling knows it. He raided a settlement that was under your protection, not out of malice, he says, out of confusion about the boundary. His eyes say he knew the boundary. Your Huscarls are watching, your Gothi is watching, 3 Lendmen who made the journey specifically for this thing are watching. The Skald's hands are very still, which means he's listening hardest. What you decide becomes what you are, and what you are becomes what your people are, and what your people are determines whether the neighboring Jarls consider you strong enough to leave alone or weak enough to test. You think, briefly, of a farm, a field of barley, a woman's silence that meant love and worry braided together, a harvest that came in barely enough. There is a Bondi somewhere in this region doing exactly that life right now, worrying about exactly those things, and he is worrying about them in a measure of peace that exists partly because you exist. This thought is not comfort, it is ballast. You name the punishment. It is not the harshest available option, and it is not the most lenient. It is calibrated with a precision that took you 15 years to develop. The man kneeling receives it without argument, which tells you the calibration was correct. The hall receives it with a specific quality of silence that means noted, believed, accepted. Later, alone you are always eventually alone. You sit in the high seat after the hall has emptied. The fire is going down. You could call someone to tend it. You don't, for a while. You think about your father in this seat, the particular set of his shoulders that you misread as confidence for 20 years and now understand was something else, something closer to what you feel right now. The knowledge that the seat cannot be fully inhabited, only endlessly managed. Somewhere in the hall, a Thrall is sweeping. Level 9, Konung the King. There are 9 men in this room and you trust none of them completely, including yourself. This is not paranoia. This is the arithmetic of kingship, worked out over years with the rigor of a man who has watched what happens when a king chooses trust over accuracy. The man to your left has served you for 12 years. The man to your right has served you for 9. Both of these facts are true and neither of them is the same as loyalty, and you made the error of conflating them once, early, and you don't make it again. They are discussing the Eastern campaign, ships, men, timing, the disposition of the Frankish coast, the reliability of the Danish alliance. You listen to all of it and speak little. Speaking little in a room of advisors is a form of information gathering. What a man says when the king says nothing reveals more than what he says when directly questioned. You learned this from your father's Gothi, who was the wisest man in that court and therefore held no formal power. Wisdom and power are not the same distribution. You have known both men who were wise without power and men who had power without wisdom. And the second kind of man is considerably more dangerous to be in a room with. The campaign will go. You decided this before the meeting. The meeting is for something else. It is for your advisors to feel that they shaped the decision, which costs you nothing and makes them more useful. The Jarl who believes his counsel changed the king's mind works harder than the Jarl who knows it didn't. At night, your wife tells you about your youngest daughter, who has been unwell. You sit with this information and feel something that the throne does not dissolve, cannot dissolve the animal fear of a father that operates entirely beneath the level of politics. You ask the right questions. You listen. You hold her hand in the dark, and outside the window, your kingdom breathes its enormous, complicated breath. All those farms and ships and disputes and small lives, all of it resting on the architecture of your continued ability to be what you appear to be. In the morning, the Eastern campaign will be announced as decided. Your advisors will remember their role in it. The Skalds will record what you want recorded. The Jarls will tell their people that the king has chosen wisely. You will lie awake until the gray hour before dawn, as you do every night, running the calculations nobody else can run because nobody else can see all the variables. And when sleep finally comes, it will be shallow, watchful, the sleep of a man who has given his inner life to an idea called rule and received in return everything except rest. The crown does not sit on your head when you sleep, but you feel its weight regardless. You have for years. You expect you will until the day someone else in this room decides the arithmetic differently. That is the only way this ends.